you're ever looking for an RPG series that's considered a cult classic, then you need to look no further than the Suikoden series. While continually drawing erroneous comparisons to the likes of Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest, the Suikoden series stands on its own as a unique and quality entry into the PlayStation RPG library. For this particular review though, I'll be focusing on the first title in the series for the original PlayStation and now available on the PlayStation Network. Released in the US in 1996, the game was an immediate hit for those who took the plunge and gave the game a try. Those who didn't, however, may have been scared off by the abysmal-looking box art. I don't usually like to harp on something as shallow as the game's box art, but back in the mid-90s, that's pretty much all you had to go off of. I mean, look at this thing. It's fun to poke at the poor decision that was the box art, but it's also unfair considering how amazing the game inside the box was. In a time where RPGs were touting dozens of playable characters as a bullet point on their box, Suikoden featured well over 100 characters, with over 90 of them being playable. And many of these characters bring unique runes and unite attacks to the table, making assembling the perfect team fun, rewarding, and satisfying. The music was astoundingly good, the story well written, and the world very well realized and presented. There are a few missteps regarding the translation and the dialogue, but for the most part the game is a shining example of how to write an engaging and emotionally compelling game narrative. The story revolves around a young hero that is the son of a powerful general for the Scarlet Moon Empire. As the story unravels, you'll find yourself fighting against the Empire and a group of rebels that have dubbed themselves the Liberation Army. I'll leave the rest of the story up to you to experience, but suffice to say, it is a very well crafted one. Mechanically, the game is something of a marvel as well. Now, the core gameplay is strictly a traditional turn-based RPG, so if that's something that you've never found appealing, Suikoden is not going to change your mind. Magic is handled via runes that characters equip, and there's also your standard set of items that heal, escape from dungeons, etc. There are, however, small touches on the formula that refine the system into a well-polished and seemingly fresh product. These details may seem incredibly small on the surface, but they have a large impact on the overall enjoyment of the game. Take the leveling system, for instance. When you enter a new area with enemies, you'll fight some groups and level up a few times. Now, once the game feels that you've made enough progress that the enemies are no longer a threat to you, the standard run option of combat turns into let go. Selecting this function allows you to release the enemy from combat and continue on your way quickly. There is also a bribe command that allows you to buy your way out of a fight in the event that your team is in shambles and you're just trying to reach some safety. Now, another issue that you'll regularly face in a game with so many playable characters is that some of them are going to be left behind in levels. Suikoden handles this rather well, as all you need to do is put the low-level character in your party, and then the game distributes XP in such a way that they will be caught up only after a few battles. I could go on and on about the intelligent design decisions made by Suikoden, but then we would be here all day. Another staple of the Suikoden series are duels and tactical battles, and Suikoden 1 is definitely no exception. Every now and then in the game, you'll be forced into a military skirmish or a one-on-one duel with the enemy. These basically play out like an elaborate rock-paper-scissors confrontation, but bring some refreshing variety to the game as they do a great job of breaking up the traditional RPG combat and provide a rather nice bookend to the chapters of the game. Don't expect them very often though, because there's only a handful of each throughout the game. Now, I wouldn't be doing my job as a reviewer if I didn't also bring up the points where Suikoden tends to suffer. The 2D sprites hold up for the most part, but the 3D visuals definitely show their age, as the game was made during the rough transition from a mainly 2D video game landscape to the 3D games we know of today. As mentioned before, some of the translation can be kind of spotty in places, and trying to figure out what runes actually do short of using them in combat is kind of a pain. It's also worth noting that the requirements for recruiting all 108 Stars of Destiny can be very nebulous and frustrating as well, but I'll touch on that a little bit more later. Perhaps the biggest issue that the game faces though is in the inventory and equipment system. In RPGs these days, we use the standard Best Equip function, where a game does the tedious work for you and simply equips all the best items available to you. Suikoden, sadly, does not have this feature and is exacerbated by the lack of a party inventory. Each character has 9 slots for items and equipment. This means that if a character were to have something equipped in each of their equipment slots, they would only have 4 slots left open for items. The biggest pain, though, is trying to actually equip the best items for your party. In order for a character to equip something, it has to be in their inventory. So if the character Pawn is holding something that I want the character Cleo to equip, I have to take it out of Pawn's inventory and put it into Cleo's. But if Cleo's inventory is full, I have to take an item out of her inventory first, give it to somebody else, and then take the equipment I need from Pawn's inventory, and you can see how it could get very tedious very fast. With that being all my major complaints about the game, you will see why it's considered a classic and should be enjoyed by any RPG fans that haven't already given it a shot. The game will usually take about 15 hours or so to complete for new players. I recommend playing through it once naturally just so you get the full effect of the narrative and enjoy the game the way the designers intended it to be enjoyed. After completing it once though, I highly recommend that you go through the game again using a guide to make sure you get all the characters and see a slightly different ending. The second time you go through the game should only take about 10 to 15 hours assuming you make good use of the let go command. But seriously, I would definitely use a guide to find all 108 stars. While some of you may be able to figure it out naturally, some of the things you have to do in order to recruit characters is very obscure, and will likely frustrate you when you spend hours trying to recruit a star, only to find out you just didn't taste the right stew, in the right house, in the right village that you were told the star was not in. Suikoden is certainly a masterpiece in its time. Even today, it's still considered a stellar entry into the RPG genre, and more than worth the paltry $6 it will cost you on the PlayStation Network. Expertly crafted narrative, music, and mechanics seem to be lost to many developers these days, but that doesn't mean you still can't experience these things in a classic like Suikoden. Buy it, play it, and enjoy it. Oh, and make sure you hang on to your save file after you've finished as well, because if you thought Suikoden was a fantastic game, you'll be blown away by what's coming next.